This is One Soccer Today for this Thursday, January the 30th, with Jordan Wilson and Gareth Wheeler.
Go on,
I am
Wheeler.
Adam Jenkins. On today's program, Champions League, Champions Cup, transfers, advice to our younger selves, and a little bit more. We'll begin, though, with the transfer window that is closing imminently. We are seeing Canadians and, quite frankly, internationals with any kind of passport across the world of football moving left, right, and center. We know Tejan Buchanan is seemingly in a much better position, but that leaves us to ask the question, Jordan Wilson, if you were to choose one Canadian international that could benefit the most from a move before the window slams shut, who would it be?
Ali Ahmed. This player is going to be huge for Canada for the World Cup, but just in the near future. Look at the way he plays, his profile, the way that he's developed and grown. Just you're thinking of this guy going to Whitecaps just in 2023 in terms of being with the first team regularly. And the way that he's grown exponentially in his game and the way that he runs at players, he can play in different spots. I understand why his team and probably himself are taking their time to try to find that right fit, because it is risky, especially when you're coming from a North American club and you go over to Europe. I know he's been linked to a few clubs in the Championship or Serie A. The fee is probably the thing that they haven't worked out, but there's so many things that have to get right when you're looking at a transfer. But I could see this player playing at a big club that pushes. But again, you don't want to see him make that move of being steady at the Whitecaps roster and then going to a place where he's getting benched or there's like 2-3 coaches coming in a season. You want to have him at the right position to make that move. But he's a big name, a big player that shows up in big ways. I know Jesse Marsh rates him. This is that crucial time in his career, 2025, with the World Cup you're hosting in 2026. You want a guy like that to go to greener pastures, but just getting it right is crucial.
It just depends where that is. Ali Ahmed is a different type of player. He's a little bit unorthodox, and I say that in a complimentary way. I don't think he suits every team and every system of play. So he needs to go to the right spot. I agree a move would be probably what would be in his best interest. But I will say this, he didn't have a great year last season at Whitecaps. I think he shines more or was more prominent for the national team than he was at club level last year. I kind of feel the same way for Ali Ahmed that I do for Nathan Saliba. Both are due for a move, but not this window. I would prefer to see those players start with their MLS sides, play through to the summer, and then be able to maybe make that move come the summertime and hit the ground running with their new club. I think that would serve the players in their best interests. Jumping on midstream, jumping in January, if you aren't going to leave an indelible mark and be a player that can impact that side right away, then I would suggest making the move in the summertime. In the summer window makes a whole lot more sense to me. But for Ali Ahmed, it's got to be a matter of time. I just hope that it's 6 months from now rather than over the course of the next 3 or 4 days.
That plays an effect too, Jenko. Sorry, just to Wheels' point, like, you're thinking about the body as well. You think about these North American players where as much as you try to stay fit in the off season, you go to a club, if you make that move in January, you're still playing catch up to a league and the championship. They don't stop. They stop for about 5 weeks and get a little vacation, they go away, and then they're back to the grind. So Wheels is on it as well. And you can see, if you look at the players that leave in the winter, there is that learning curve that naturally happens with the club, but it's tough. You go into cold conditions that they're already battle tested. You have to try to catch up to their play.
Well, Gareth, that's a look ahead to next window, perhaps, for those two players. This window, who would you, if you were the agent for anyone you could choose, and you were saying it's time for you to go, whose time is it to go for the Canadian men's national team?
Well, unfortunately, the name is Ismail Kone. That's the player that's been most widely speculated to go, but nothing seems to be resolved. And I think that if he ends up staying at a club with a manager that doesn't want the player to be part of the plans for the project now or in the future, then he could potentially be in a position where the next 6 months are wasted. He's the biggest concern to me. I also wanted to address maybe some of the rumors around Stefan Eustáquio, because he's the other player that's largely been rumored to be potentially up for a move or requiring a move. he's been playing a lot for FC Porto, and Porto remains competitive in the Portuguese league as well. They're sitting in third place, but with the managerial change at Sporting Lisbon, and they're basically neck and neck with Benfica as well. I think there's opportunity for Porto potentially to get back in the Champions League next year. So where would that place be? That's when it comes to Eustáquio. I don't think that there's any Canadian player where you'd say, well, that player might, not be ready to make another move. I put Alphonso Davies in that category. Like, as far as I've heard, like, it's the ink isn't wet on a new contract at Bayern Munich as of yet. Like, I still think he could go for a move at Real Madrid. So any player needs to be able to make these big decisions. Eustáquio is also 28. He needs to be a key player come next summer. So only he knows and can read the tea leaves, what that means for playing like a club for SC Porto, what his opportunities may look like. But it's looked better over the last few months than it did previous to that. The other name I want to bring up, because it's really interesting, we heard on a podcast Jesse Marsh speaking about Alistair Johnston, and he's a player right in his prime. I think that he's done really well at a club like Celtic, but the comments of the manager that the game looks a little bit too easy for him at times, that for me is problematic. And that for me suggests that potentially a move away from Celtic would suit the player's needs and requirements. Yes, he fits Celtic to a T. He's taken upon a leadership role. Celtic are moving on in the Champions League and he's playing continental football. All of these are massive positives. And quite frankly, he looks happy being in Glasgow as well. But there's a gap between Premier League and maybe some of the other top 5 leagues in Europe to where Celtic are at present time. They're playing from a deficit here because the Scottish Premiership just isn't all that competitive. And how do you get better week in, week out? It's not just playing in the Champions League. It's testing yourself against better competition. And when I hear the Canadian manager use words like that, perhaps Alistair Johnston as early as this summer, because he's really in his prime right now, Adam, perhaps he requires a move to test himself and be able to see if he can take his game to the next level. And at every jump, at every time he's tried to step up his game, Alistair Johnston has succeeded. He has gone over that mark. So perhaps it's time that he potentially moves on as well.
Well, much like Celtic are moving on in the Champions League, we're moving our show on to the Champions League because the first phase is complete. And while it is a very long graphic with 36 clubs listed, we do know the top 8, which are the clubs that will get the automatic bye. Liverpool tops them all with 21 points from 8 matches. Barca with a great goal differential at plus 15. They were just 2 points back of Liverpool. Arsenal, Inter, Atleti, Leverkusen, Lille, and Aston Villa, that top 8. Villa with another big win at their home ground. You could take different things from this. You see the PSGs scraping by. You see Man City on the same amount of points as Dinamo, who were eliminated from competition. All of those middle clubs will have to do battle to make it into the round of 16. A lot of meat on the bone, Gareth. You have talked about at length what you've enjoyed about this new format, and I'm right there with you. I think it's been new, it's been fun, it's been exciting. But if there was one big surprise for you, Wheels, what would that be?
This is going to seem like we're taking a Canadian focus for the sake of it, but that's not the case. Lille are the biggest surprise of the group stage. Absolutely. And the fact that Jonathan David has helped lead this team to get essentially a bye. They don't have to play in the next round of the competition where it's a knockout. There's a home and away between sides that finish 9th to 24 on the table. Lille finishes 7th and gets that bye into the next round. And the fact that Jonathan David and company did so after losing key players in the summer, operating on a fraction of a budget as the other clubs, but they've looked very much the part. This wasn't a cakewalk in terms of the teams that they played over the course of this league stage as well. Liverpool, Juventus, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, they played tough teams. And the fact that they ended up punching their way to a 7th place finish in the league table, that's just an incredible accomplishment. And there's got to be a whole lot of pride coming from and emanating from this country based on the fact that Jonathan David helped lead the way in terms of this incredible league stage of this competition. So well done to Lille. I will say this. I think there could be a negative side to this. I hope that this doesn't tempt Jonathan David to stay at Lille long term. I think that he, in his best interest for him and his career, would to be moving on come the summer. But the fact that Lille still challenging in League 1, still doing well in the Champions League, I guess it comes down to dollars and cents, what they're willing to pay him and what other opportunities present themselves. But I do think that Jonathan David is ripe for a new challenge, despite the continued success that he continues to have at this club.
Jordan.
I like your picks. I like your pick, Wheels. I think too, when I'm thinking about the Champions League and the new format, which I do love, because there's something on the bone for everyone, right? Like it's not all, the teams are going to be there, you're fighting. But when I looked at this competition, Aston Villa, there's no way, after not being in this competition for 42 years, I would think would be in the top 8. They played well. They beat Bayern 1-0. The way that they stepped up and played well in season in the Premier League, but also in this competition, I think needs to be mentioned. So shout out to KJ and Charlie O'Connor. I know that they're huge Villa fans, or whoever else is a Villa fan out there.
The CAMPL guys.
Nah, man, they're doing well. If you see them play too, the first 3 wins they had, confident. And then you have to grind out some wins as well. But shout out to Villa. Shout out to teams in the Premier League who were just kind of mid-table and doing well in this competition. It's big.
Shout out to John Duran taking his talents to Saudi Arabia.
Shout out to Homeboy. Get that dollar. Money talks.
Jordan goes for one walk with Christian Jack in a snowy park somewhere in Toronto, and he is sipping the tea. That feature is available. That interview is available on One Soccer. Let's chat about the Vancouver Whitecaps. While Jordan Wilson might like to see Ali Ahmed move on in the foreseeable future, someone that sounds like they are moving on imminently is Scottish designated player Stuart Armstrong. At Hard Journalist on X on it first. She does some work for Canadian Soccer Daily, amongst other outlets. Tom Bogert following up to say it looks like he is out, and it's going to be announced in the coming days at that. All while Vancouver Whitecaps are in Marbella, Spain, preparing for CONCACAF Champions Cup. They will be returning to Vancouver end of next week, I believe, and they'll be doing so from the sounds of it without one of their DPs. Gareth, I think it's a simple question with maybe a complicated answer, but I don't think it's any surprise based on some of the rumblings we were hearing from British Columbia that Stuart Armstrong was perhaps looking to head back to the United Kingdom. But Sheffield Wednesday, and all of a sudden this is real, and the Caps have to deal with the fact that they're losing a DP.
What a disaster. Like, look, the Caps have gone through this before recently with players not wanting to be there. Julian Gressel ended up staying for a while. Fafa Picault ended up staying there for a while. But Armstrong's a different gravy for me. It's even more difficult because he's a designated player. I spoke of this when I talked about the future of the Whitecaps, potentially outside the city of Vancouver. It is very difficult to compete for Canadian clubs to compete in Major League Soccer at a time where clubs like LAFC, the Galaxy, Inter Miami, Atlanta United, the list goes on, clubs splashing significant cash. When you invest in a designated player, if you're any of these Canadian clubs, you have to get it right. And bringing in a player who didn't want to be there, who played 6 games for the club, does not constitute getting it right. And now they're going to have to replace. They may be well on their way to replacing, but it always seems like the Whitecaps move at a glacial pace in terms of their recruitment because they need to get things right. So they take their time with these matters. Now you have a side that's supposed to be good enough to compete against those in the Western Conference with a big gaping hole in their team. They lack attacking talent. They lack players in that area. And that's not to say Stuart Armstrong was the be-all and end-all. Quite frankly, I think they can do better than the player, but now you have that gap. It's not catastrophic. You can still fill that role, but it seems to put Vancouver a step back, especially with the ownership situation looming. Are there any caps? What sort of limitations does Axel Schuster have in terms of what he can spend to bring in a new player to try to make this team better? Because inevitably, that's what it's all about. And with the club for sale right now, I'm not sure how much they want to leverage or spend their own dollars to make a significant jump here. Maybe they just try to keep the wheels spinning. So this is all problematic for me, a bad look, and I don't think this means good things for the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Jordan Wilson.
It's tough. We've talked about this team closely and about their attacking prowess or lack of it, and how they're probably a man and a half short of really competing, right? And they still haven't really found that person. For a player to come in and play 6 games and then say deuces and want to go back to the UK to play, for me, that just screams as well that, to Wheels' point, you have to have the right person that wants to come to North America and make a difference. And also adapt to how things are over here, the different pitches, the travel, and all of that. For him to say so early, we just got used to saying his name and seeing him in games and maybe him contributing, and then he's gone. It's like the time and the process, to Wheels' point, you have to make sure that person that's coming in is the right person. And Vancouver Whitecaps have missed that threat for a while now. Like, they've had one steady and a Brian White, but they haven't done it and brought in that DP that they would need to really take it to the next level. So will they do it this season? I think even too about coaching staff is like, you have a different coach, you feel like you want to go into a different direction, but what on paper looks different for Vancouver Whitecaps heading into this 2025 season? Not much for me.
Well, new manager, but they're in CONCACAF Champions Cup against Saprissa, and they're not going to have one of their designated players for it. Like, what can they get over the line? Like, how can you do? I don't know. It's just really disappointing. You know, there should be more excitement. The way the season ended, playing a playoff game that should have been at home, away from home. It's just like, I don't like the headlines right now emanating out of Vancouver with the Whitecaps. What's the opposite of Armstrong? Weak leg?
Don't do that.
Leg weak?
Don't
It's
do
just...
that.
Yeah,
Was it
That's how I feel about the
90
situation.
Was a
Weak
90-second grenade
Weak
when we
leg.
tried to get on air.
That's
for
a leg
that,
week.
and
By the way,
thought he
they
was going to
still
catch me.
They still should beat Saprissa, even with the squad. They still should
They
be going
should
to the next round.
absolutely beat Saprissa.
100%.
Yes, they should be expecting to do that, and we'll see them try to do that on One Soccer, just as we'll see Forge take on Monterrey and Cavalry against Pumas. That is all coming up next week on the channel. We'll spend some time today with Forge as we continue to march closer. Less than a week away now, Jordan Wilson. We will see them at Tim Hortons Field, and I have a feeling, or not Tim Hortons Field, I beg your pardon. I'm still getting used to the fact that it's no longer called that. I just don't know what the new name is. We'll see them in Hamilton, and Hamilton is expected to be very chilly. I know I'm going to be bundled up in the press box with scarves and hand warmers and all kinds of layers, and I'm not going to be on the pitch in what Tommy Whelan Jr. has always famously called the wind tunnel. So the weather seems to be on Forge's side. They still have to play football. How do you think they're going to approach this leg one on Wednesday?
I've been thinking about and wrestling with it, that if I was a manager, what you would do with a team that isn't fully fit. But yeah, you've been in Mexico for 2 weeks training, but this is a match that comes so early, and you're playing against one of the Mexican giants. Though on the one hand, you could sit back. It probably doesn't favor you because you won't have enough juice to maybe go and score a goal a week later and go and take it to Monterrey. I say you got to go for it. And there were spurts last year where they did that. Their goal that Terran Campbell scored, I believe, to equalize that game, it was a great goal, well worked. And Bobby Spiniola talked about the switch of play and really catching teams, or that team on the counter. And they played well. But I think for this, going into this match on February 5th, you have to think you have to score and you have to go and win it. Because if you don't, going to Mexico, it's hard to turn that around. So that has to be the mantra for the team, is that you got to go and try to win that first game. That's the only way you can really dream.
Wills.
Well, it's more about how for me. Look, these games are tough. Pumas and Monterrey, the two sides of the Canadian Premier League teams are playing against. They've struggled at the start of the new Mexican League campaign, but these are proven very good teams with high-end talent. What I know about Forge, watching them for as long as we have under Bobby Smirniotis, they play one way. Like, they're not going to like park the bus against one of these teams and try to like hang on. Maybe they do need to play a little bit more pragmatic though. It's going to be really cold. It's going to be difficult conditions, uncomfortable conditions. What can play to Forge's strength? Is it playing some wide open brand of style and just staying true to their principles? Or do you need to kind of pack it in a little bit? Obviously that needs to be weighed out based on what sort of side the Mexican team is going to bring up. Oftentimes, especially for these away trips, and it's going to be really difficult conditions, they might bring more of a second team up here with them, which means that Forge can maybe get away with playing more of their own signature brand of football. So that's what I'm wondering, whether these experiences in the past where they've looked really good at times, although the scoreline hasn't like done them any favors, is Smirniotis willing to change maybe Forge's approach to try to be a little bit more pragmatic to come away with the results?
I feel like too with this Wheels, you have to really just bank on the fact that they've won this offseason, like by a landslide, in my opinion. It's those players like the Nimics, the Babulis, the Wrights that you're really looking to add something different and really have that infusion within the squad. Like you can't take, I mean, they could, but for me, you can't wait until the CPL season to really go and show your worth. This is the game where you have to go and say, this is why I've signed. I'm a Forge player now, and really state your claim. Is that a Nimic header early? Is that a Brian Wright goal in the first half? Mo Babuli doing what he did when he played for Forge and also York. Like those three names stick out to me to really go and start and show why they're at Forge and why they want to play on these big occasions.
They're deeper and they have players with more experience that are going to be playing in these ties. Like last year in the Champions Cup, Kalongo was making like really his first game of real profile, starting that. Malcolm Duncan was a very inexperienced right back at that time. Like you looked at the team that they were playing against Chivas, it was no way near as experienced and as ready as this year's team will be, even considering the changes that have been made in the team. So they have a better chance, like at least, maybe causing some problems this time around.
Yeah, we're very excited for it. We will continue to preview and get you set for the match on Wednesday at Hamilton Stadium, an 8 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff with pregame coverage on One Soccer. Jordan Wilson has been very busy preparing for these matches and seemingly FaceTiming everyone in the Canadian Premier League, getting some insights and having some fun conversations that are all available on the One Soccer digital platforms. But there was one with Forge captain Kyle Becker and a snippet from that chat that we'd like to play from you now.
What kind of guy are you in preseason? Because I spoke with Mo Babuli. He seems like he needs to be foam rolling for about an hour. He needs that nice deep tissue. Like, are you the guy that always has energy, or are you just dragging the feet to lunch?
I don't know. Listen, they've looked differently every single year. And the older you get, I think you have to change. And otherwise, it'll pass you by. You might not get as many as you want. So it's for sure changed. I'm doing a lot more ice baths than I would have been doing in my younger years, that's for sure. I'm meditating, which is crazy. Nice. If you told a 21-year-old Kyle he'd be meditating every single morning, I think he'd laugh in your face. So things change, man.
That was Kyle Becker from a Mexican yoga retreat, by all accounts, in the conversation with Jordan Wilson. More of that at One Soccer on X and Instagram. Jordan, interesting dynamic always, those chats. The veteran players especially, you guys can relate to each other with how the body isn't quite the same as it was when you were first breaking into things, but Kyle just keeps on revving, getting ready for another CPL and Champions Cup season. He brought up the point, 21-year-old Kyle Becker wouldn't believe the things he was doing now. What is something that 21-year-old Jordan Wilson wouldn't believe that current Jordan Wilson is doing now?
Well, the 33-year-old Jordan Wilson is just amazed of the job and the people that I have, that I get blessed to do this beautiful job with every single day. Like, I watch footy now to break it down. It's not like, before, like with 20-year-old me would never think that I'm watching footy to go and like talk about it. I would just think that I'd be doing it. Even in the coaching role, I'm like, when I'm done playing, I'm done. I'm stepping away from the game. And then now I'm like, what was I thinking? This is a drug that I love. So I think even just when I think about like breaking down the game and talking about it is something I never expected. I thought I would just be done and I would leave that world behind me. And maybe I didn't even think I'd be done at 33. I thought I would just play until the wheels fell off. But I would say probably this. What I do now is it's a blessing, but it's a bit surprising. I didn't think I would be in this career or this field.
Gareth Wheeler.
See, I do live with football regret that some of the things that I do now I wasn't doing in the past. I mean, it's fascinating to watch players and how they go about extending their career. Like Ryan Giggs, at one stage of his career, was dealing with hamstring problem after hamstring problem, and he got into yoga and a lot of these other techniques and extended his career beyond the age of 40. He was playing central midfield. What an absolute boss. So for me, I don't know about how younger players work today, these days, but I kind of took my physical ability for granted and I didn't hit the gym anywhere near enough. I'm going to the gym more now than I was 25 years ago. I'm a vegetarian. Like my diet was crap back in those formative years and days when it should have been better. And now I'm in a much different place. Same thing, breathing techniques, meditation. I do all these things now later in life. And I think to myself, how good how much better could I have been if I just employed some of these techniques back then? So there's plenty, even little things like going out 2 nights the night before games, not completely on the lash, but going out and having a good time when I could have put all my focus into my football. So these are things that you learn over time, things that you need to do in order to come away with a better outcome. Unfortunately, a time machine or a hot tub time machine hasn't been invented yet. So I live with that regret each and every day of my life.
No regret, Wheels.
21-year-old me would
Definite
be
regret.
shocked that my day-to-day revolves around taking care of a home that I own, and how absolutely incapable I am at some of the tasks that I thought, like, oh, the washing machine's
You're like
broken.
21 2 years ago. What are you talking about?
I was 21 7 years. Actually,
Okay.
on Saturday, I will have been 21 8 years ago. Thank you very much. So that's just a reminder. Get your birthday cards
Everyone,
in the mail.
yeah, wish him
Thank
happy
you very
birthday.
much.
You're not a birthday that we could ever forget. You would definitely let us know before. You're coming with that Andy Petrilla energy. Absolutely.
I'm sitting in her chair. I got to take after
a month
her
in
where I
advance.
can. Let's get to the Tony Bet topics. In today's Tony Bet Top Pick segment, we're actually going to go back to a topic raised earlier in the show and discuss Jonathan David's goal scoring prowess. This is the updated Golden Boot race in Ligue 1. Mason Greenwood of Marseille leads the way barely over Dembele, Barcola, and David, all chasing on 11 goals. So question 1, I suppose, would be, are you putting your money on Jonathan David to win the Golden Boot, Gareth Wheeler, with 15 matches remaining?
It's tough to me. There's still some value. The fact that he takes penalties and he's the most reliable goal scoring threat on a Lille side. I wonder how the Champions League navigation moving forward might play into whether they rest him a little bit more. I'm not quite sure. It's difficult for me to go off of the 2 PSG players, Bradley Barcola and Ousmane Dembele, because PSG under Luis Enrique over the last 4 to 6 weeks have really hit their stride. Koulibaly's gone out to Juventus, putting more of a reliance on those players. They also have Champions League to deal with, but generally they're a higher scoring team and generate more chances. Their XG will be higher than Jonathan David moving forward as well. So since they're level on goals, I'll go with one of the PSG 2. I lean to Dembele over Barcola, but either one for me is a decent bet.
Jordan Wilson.
Bet J. David. Nice, man. Why not? I mean, again, I said I was going to bet this year based off of the fact that I always said last year I had no money, but this year maybe there's a little bit of change that I'm borrowing from Gareth Wheeler. Because he's got the big bucks. You got the big bucks, Wheels, don't you? You got to bet on the board. But Wheels said something specific, which is like the pens and the fact that he has the confidence. I would put money on him. But you could also see for me, if I had to pick someone else, Mason Greenwood could easily take that away. And it's also nice to see a player like that step up in a different league.
Well, line's always subject to change, but at the moment, Mason Greenwood plus 108, Jonathan David plus 150, Barcola plus 298, and Ousmane Dembele plus 695. The second part of the question, Jordan Wilson, is if Jonathan David does get this Golden Boot, how many zeros is that going to add to his upcoming contract, whether that's at Lille or elsewhere?
This is such a crucial time for him, but is there a world where he stays, Wheels? Like, does he? We've been talking about this guy for a while, and the fact that he can play, and people talk about league like it's a farm league, and he could do better. But like, if he has a great 6 months, like I know he will, does Lille sign this guy again? Do they offer him an offer that he just can't refuse? We've been talking about so many clubs he could go to, and I've never even pictured him being back at Lille. But is there a possibility that happens?
I should also mention Jonathan David does lead Liga in expected goals. I'm just trying to project where things go from here. He could stay. I just fail to believe that someone won't come in and add a different number on top of what that number might be. That's a little bit higher than Lille can offer. And being comfortable in your surrounding is one thing, but show me the money. Show me the money.
Money talks, baby.
Show me the money. For Jordan Wilson, Gareth Wheeler, I'm Adam Jenkins. Thanks for joining us. Back tomorrow on One Soccer Today.